As you might know by now from listening to the great Dan Byer on his updates or just being alive and on social media, the Mets have now officially unloaded their two $40+ million Cy Young, aging, all-star, Hall of Fame pitchers.
And there's a lot of questions being posed on social media. Like, how would you define this era or this experiment? This 2023 failed season? Like, really miserable situations for the Mets to think of how much promise was there and how you going all in with these big names to now dismantle them. And Verlander goes back to Houston.
God,
Scherzer goes to Texas.
Can you
that's
pivot?
Embarrassing.
Can you pivot? Pivot.
Pivot.
Can you pivot or does Steve Cohen, billionaire who wants to win, he owns his own favorite team, which is rare, right? Does Steve Cohen have the ability to say, listen, in a world of impatient fans, especially Mets fans, who are the most impatient because not only are we still hanging on to the glory of Gary Carter's afro and Darryl Strawberry in the 80s,
Sid Fernandez's fat ass,
and Keith Hernandez's glorious mustache. Know who had another great mustache? Howard Johnson.
Great mustache. Hojo.
Mm-hmm. Met fans are impatient also because crosstown, the Yankees always do everything they can do to compete. Whether they win it or not, the Yankees are always in it to win it.
We don't know what's going on this year.
Dating someone. It's like dating someone. It's like dating someone that doesn't go the extra mile, and your buddy's girlfriend goes the extra mile. You look across town. It's like even when the Yankees don't win, it's not by lack of effort by management to put a winning team out there.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't make the moves soon enough. Sometimes there's less options on the table. You said dating. The dating analogy is the older you get sometimes, the less options are out there.
Well, I said
there's
to you,
no good options. And with the Yankees, all the people that they had their eyes on are sort of off the table now. So it's like, well, what do they do?
Well, I said that to you earlier today. I said, Yankees fans and people on big market teams and fans of like the Dodgers, teams that are in it to win it, fans are always barking like, you got to make a deal, trade deadline. What are we doing? Make a deal. And truth be told, if the right deal isn't there, sometimes no deal is better than the wrong deal. And I feel like sometimes teams are pressured by the fan base and a GM that's trying to save face or his job might pull the trigger on a deal that maybe he shouldn't have done.
I heard writer Jack Curry say, sometimes all you need is for the people that you already invested in to step up and play the way they were supposed to. Unfortunately, it's not that easy.
Now, on my notes, Mets, what the F? There's a couple things here. In the history, it's a history's a long time. I would say, let's say in the 21st century, in the last 23 years, since the year 2000, has there been a team with higher hopes and a higher payroll and more promise than the 2023 Mets that failed on this level?
No.
Now, there have been teams you could say, well, go back to when the Lakers added some of those big pieces like 04, and that team still made it, just didn't finish the job. This is a Mets team that's under 500.
Oh, this is a Mets team that they said, by getting rid of all these players, this was a failed experiment. This was a failure.
Put away the Bunsen burners.
You know what
Experiment's over.
For Verlander to go back to Houston, for Scherzer to say, well, if you guys have no future this year or next year, I'm out. It's sort of embarrassing for them, too, because they also decided to make those moves. They agreed to this. It's like when your pal moves to the big city and they fail and have to come home and face their friends in old reality. It's like my brother who moved out of the house and is kind of struggling now because the economy stinks, and he's doing everything he can to not go back home because I don't
want to move into mom and dad's basement again.
It just solidifies and proves to everybody, well, in his mind anyway, that
I failed.
It was a failure. Yeah. And going back to Houston has to feel that way to some degree, or maybe a relief, I don't know. And moving on for Verlander.
Verlander's happy. What are you talking about?
I'm saying, he's probably happy now, but it's still a failed experiment.
Still Kate Upton's probably like, let's pack the bags. We won in Houston. Let's go back.
Actually, the sentiment on social media is kind of funny, too, because a lot of Houston fans were like, yo, we got Kate Upton back, and she's bringing her husband with her.
So you could say failed experiment. Yes.
Absolutely.
You could say, can you pivot? And see, I was telling Ramos yesterday, my thought was keep Verlander and you make adjustments, you pivot, you revamp for next year, and you'll have a guy like Verlander, while he is getting older, you have a guy like Verlander as your ace, your number one, and you can build around him and fill in the pieces. Now, in the past 2 years, the Mets said farewell to DeGrom, Scherzer, Verlander. What do you have? Cody Senga, who's been really good. But after that, I bet you can't even name a Mets starter in the rotation right now.
No one's happy about a failed experiment. When you think about the money involved, this is probably the prime example of just a bad season.
Covino.
And bad moves. And people not coming through and injuries and how you really can't predict anything based on the names on the roster.
Super teams, mega teams. They've all competed and lost many a times. But has any of those teams, what they did in Brooklyn with the Nets, what they did with the Clippers, those teams still competed and lost, just never got there. We're talking about a team that isn't even in the playoffs with 6 teams, a third wild card, and the Mets are 5 games. If they're 5 teams away from the third wild card, it's an embarrassing failed experiment. And, I wanted to take today's show to not only read what Justin Verlander said and what what Scherzer said. This is according to Max Scherzer when he left the Mets. I was like, so the team is not going to be pursuing free agents this offseason or assembling a team that could compete for a World Series next year? He was asking the teams because he had a no-trades clause if he wanted it. So he was like...
And he had said earlier in the week he had to speak to Mets management and the Mets brass about...
where the direction was going.
Yeah, and how did they get rid of their closer, and what's up with that?
Yeah.
And then 24 hours later, he's gone.
So, a guy with his clout and a no-trade clause, he had every right to say, hey, where's the direction of this team going? And anyone that's interested in me, before I decide to get traded there, because I have that right, where's the direction of this team going?
Well, I think he made a fair assumption that something was up when he got rid of David Robertson. Yeah. So he had every reason to acquire some information.
He said management of the Mets, Billy Epler and crew, said, no, we're not going to be signing the upper echelon guys. We're going to be on the smaller deals with free agency. 2024 is not looking to be 2024 is now looking to be more of a transitionary year for the Mets. After the high hopes of the highest payroll, this is the team. As a Mets fan, I thought for years, well, at least they'll compete. This team's built to at least make the postseason. Like, the Dodgers are in it every year. Even if they don't win, that they're built to at least keep you interested. They may lose in the playoffs, but they're in it. I thought I was going to have that as a fan.
I don't think the Mets after last season should be already into a transitionary mode.
You won 101 games last year.
No. And that is the wrong way.
And now it's a rebuild? It's so bad.
Fast.
That's exactly why Scherzer left, though, and that's why he went to Texas, because he wanted to know what next year was all about.
It's wild.
He wanted to play for a contending team next year. And the minute he found out that the Mets were not really going for it, then he said, all right, then I'm out.
You got Lindor. You got Nimmo. You got Pete Alonso. You got Cody Senga. You got a lot of these guys signed to big contracts that you believe are the core of this team. And you're pretty much saying, yeah, we have a new owner that will spend more money than anyone, but we're going to transition a little bit. Disappointing.
So disappointing. Like I said, anytime you're part of a failed experiment or a failed business, it's going to feel terrible at first. But I feel we've been part of maybe a failed experiment, and then you end up in somewhere where you're happier and you realize that, as Fred Durst says, Rich, everything happens for a reason.
Reason.
And not to sound corny, but it's true.